The narrative goes that when I was performing my beats for Tupac, he started to perform a freestyle in front of me, and I recall his influence. He sold more than 3 million records, but never received a single royalty check. Jon B stunned fans last month when he acknowledged that his platinum album Cool brought in less than $800,000. The R&B artist from the 1990s even launched a GoFundMe page to repurchase his own songs, but it failed terribly today, as the reality about his conflict with Jay-Z came to light. With the IRS and the eerie remark about Beyoncé when she was a teenager that destroyed his. People are in awe of his entire career, from selling his mansion to foreclosure. This is what actually happened to the biggest hits for only $125,000. In 1974, Jon B was born in Providence, Rhode Island. He came from the. His father was a music professor and conductor, thus music was all around him. Classical music was all around him growing up in a home where his mother played concert piano. Anticipated that all of the children would follow in his footsteps. His sister played violin, and his brother played cello. Jon followed suit. Initially studying the piano, then adding the drums and bass when he was a teenager, but in the background, he was falling for someone else. And Soul Jon was surreptitious as his parents pushed Mozart and Beethoven, while listening to Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder. That silent revolt influenced anything that transpired when the family relocated to Pasadena when Jon was 4 years old. He grew up in California, where he struggled to find his place. He was at the age of 13, a white child who was captivated by black music was already composing demo cassettes in his mother's spare room. He recorded more than just a few tracks using 40 tracks, producing, composing, and playing everything himself with inexpensive gear. He added jazz and other unusual noises in addition to simply mimicking what he heard. That, even at that age, made his music stand out. He is still attempting to get into R&B. Since he was a white adolescent, executives would bluntly inform him that he didn't look the part and sounded too black, but Jon persisted. At 16, he had his own small studio at home where he taught, and his recording skills continued to improve. Self-made strategy to accomplish everything, which would turn into one of his greatest strengths. Jon obtained a job to earn money and maintain ties to the music industry. Restocking warehouse record shelves. The majority of people were unaware that he truly got his start in music when his grandparents managed a record store. Education. He learned from Earth, Wind and other legends by studying old vinyl albums. He would borrow recordings, take them home, and fire Donna Summer and the Bee Gees. Listen to them repeatedly when he began to slip at warehouse recordings. Every time a significant person entered, he would place his demo recordings into shopping bags. Was a bold step, but it paid off. He began to receive attention before he ever. Jon began writing songs for well-known artists after releasing his own music. One of his, Heaven Can Wait, was originally intended for Blackstreet, but Michael Jackson. He also worked with Toni Braxton. He heard it and desired it for himself. Not everyone experienced that kind of stuff. New Edition. After 7 and more, Peter Gabriel even acknowledged his talent, extending an invitation to Jon to participate in a songwriting retreat in England. Jon had even put out a single before something happened that completely altered. In 1994, while working at Motown Records, Jon made the decision to provide a demo cassette to a Yabi Yum Entertainment, was a little label in the area that Tracy ran. R&B singer Babyface, Jon's wife, Edmonds, didn't give it much thought. Until he received a call from Babyface at a meeting in Motown. After hearing Jon's tape, he wanted to meet him right away. That was the beginning of Jay's career. Babyface even said, a duet recording of a song written specifically for him, Someone to Adore, yet behind the scenes weren't going as planned. Babyface had initially intended to keep the tune Label executives didn't want to give it to John since they wanted it for themselves. Believed that a newcomer, especially a white one like John, was too good to be wasted. He re-recorded the song 7 times in studio sessions since he felt he had to get it perfect. Continued into the early morning hours as Babyface exerted tremendous pressure to be flawless. In particular, producers were concerned about selecting a fresh, unknown singer when the song was chosen for the Bad Boys movie soundtrack. However, the effort paid off, as Someone to Love became a smash and made it to the top 10 on the Billboard charts and being nominated for a Grammy despite that achievement. When the song came on the radio, the majority of listeners believed that the industry still had misgivings. John was black, as evidenced by his speech and mannerisms. For months, management were afraid to show his face in promotional materials. Only displayed outlines or shadows, and his music video remained in limbo while the label discussed how to respond to it, and when it was revealed, John was seen in the dark. To lend the idea more legitimacy, Babyface and lighting took center stage. His record cover even concealed his image initially. It wasn't until Pretty Girl's second song that the label made John the center of attention. When the Grammy nomination was announced, it was a huge deal, but it also had a number of issues. Some claim that because the song didn't fit into the R&B genre, despite the fact that John was white. The Academy changed it to pop where it had charted, which displeased John. He was grateful the award, but it seemed as though he was being forced out of the genre he loved. Was an odd place to be. Some didn't take him seriously, while others believed he was receiving preferential treatment. Despite his race, the nomination increased his popularity and album sales. Soared when Bonafide, the album, was released in May 1995. John wrote and produced the most of it, and it was unique at the time. It featured jazz-inspired songs, hip-hop, and even some mellow ballads. Influences Tracy Edmonds and Babyface were taken aback by how comprehensive and unique the CD sounded. Great, but one song in particular caught our attention so much that it was named over. When Bonafide reached gold and sold over 500,000 copies, John demonstrated that he was the real deal and not simply a curiosity, but the path wasn't simple. Upon John's 1995 tour debut, many fans were taken aback by his appearance. Stage in places like Atlanta and others, several people thought he was black and were upset to learn that he wasn't. During his performances, Chicagoans left, but John persisted and transformed his strategy. He began performances with timeless R&B songs before easing into his own songs, demonstrated his abilities by playing a variety of instruments live, and even began relating personal tales in between songs to engage the audience and win them over one performance at a time by the conclusion. In 1996, he received invitations to return from the same venues that had initially rejected him. In a genre that didn't usually accept outsiders, John had managed to be himself and still gain respect. Everything had changed by the time John B. began recording his second album. Was content to be in the room and not the new guy anymore. His debut album, Bonafide, had performed admirably, but this time John desired control over success. He refused to be taught what to sing, how to sound, or what kind of person he should be, but the label had other ideas. Wanted him to be more commercial, more pop, and more polished, but John wasn't having it. Erupted during recording sessions, accompanied by intense discussions and abrasive language rather than fists. John strongly objected, bringing in outside producers Tim and Bob. David Foster and Johnny J weren't merely creating an album, they were creating tunes that the label didn't even want to put on the album, but something that felt genuine. Final cut. Since John refused to give up and kept stating that he didn't want to be a product, Cool Relax ended up running because he wanted to be an artist. John wanted the entire piece to feel finished at that point, which was more than an hour long. John received a surprise phone call while his friend Bezel was on the other line. Whilst calling from the video shoot set, Tupac claimed to be a fan of John. Didn't first think so, but he descended to the set, went through several security checks, and entered one of them. Tupac began freestyling after he performed a few of his greatest hits. Kai and JoJo were standing close by at the time, seeing all that was happening. They reconnected a few weeks later and recorded Are You Still Down? It took 2 weeks later, Tupac performed a few bits of the hook while wrapping up one night. John believed the song would never be released because Tupac was no longer with them. The label didn't. They claimed that it didn't fit his persona since it was too hazardous and dirty, but Tupac's. In order to help clean the vocals, Mother Eni Shakur intervened. That song ultimately being among Jay's most memorable songs at the same time that John's hits were becoming extremely popular. Mark Nelson John's calm song, Don't Say, was the first one. He immediately knew he had to have it after hearing him sing it in the parking lot. The young Son and Eileen in the video gave John a fresh, romantic feel. The label thought it did well on the charts, although they were unaware of that. Altered everything when that song became popular. It reached number 7 on. John wrote for the Billboard Hot 100 about all the rumors that were damaging his connection. Biggie was even sampled in the remix to give the song a more gritty feel. John had finally made it, but behind him, the song sold over 1 million copies and went platinum. Things weren't always going as planned. In 1999, John went on a tour with Destiny's Child. What should have been a momentous occasion instead became a catastrophe. Was conflict between the girls and their manager, John Knowles. Supporting LaTavia and LaToya in their struggle for greater authority when Matthew attempted to eject LaToya's mother. John and a few Jagged Edge members intervened on the tour bus to protect her. Following that, everything changed, and Matthew remembered that rumors circulated that John had banned from Knowles' family-related activities and radio stations. In the same year that John married Mus Galloway, his airtime began to wane. Gifted vocalist who had supported musicians such as Macy Gray. Their connection had long been well known, mostly because some followers applauded since Musique was a black woman and John was a white R&B performer. Others weren't so nice. People doubted his intentions and accused him of. John attempted to end the connection by exploiting it to establish his credibility. The press was informed by him that, the woman I can relate to right now is a black woman. However, the pressure persisted, and by 2001, when his third album was released, at that point, the marriage was already failing, so John requested to leave his label. He was worn out and shoved aside, but the harm had already begun. John's 1995 contract with Layface Records, which he had signed years previously, was full of pitfalls. The label withheld 20% of the money he earned from his music. 80%, and that 20% was prior to all of the deductions. One album had studio expenditures, marketing costs, and packaging fees. Future albums had to make up the losses as a result of his failure, even if his music sold millions of copies. John saw virtually nothing. His initial payment was significant, but it was all in the fine print. It quickly disappeared, though, as studio time cost him $2,000 each day. When Bonafide first appeared on the market, John was already making 6 figures from music videos. Already owed the label $200,000, when Cool Relax arrived, he received a $300,000 up front, but the expense increased for high-end producers and eye-catching videos. Heavy promotion before a single album was sold, his debt had risen to over $1 million. John believed he had some leverage in the early going when Cool Relax became platinum. He had a meeting with Layface executives in 1999 and requested improved conditions. They sneered in his face, one of them saying, "Higher royalties mean a bigger advance." However, nothing changed after that. "Kid, you should be thankful that we even let you make music." John received the numbers Cool Relax had in August 2000 when the accounting statements arrived. Generated about $15 million, but following all the deductions, he still owed more than $1 million, according to the label. Every quarter, the debt increased. Sales increased, but royalties did not. By 2003, he had sold more than 3 million albums, but they hadn't received any royalties. To make things worse. Even worse, John needed the money that EMI paid him after selling half of his publishing rights in 1996. $250,000 out front, but they get 50% of all of his lifetime writings, even when. In 2003, 50 Cent sampled "They Don't Know," but John only received 25% of the. His future earnings were cut in half by that one deal, thus the remaining funds went to EMI. Although Jon B. was trapped in a losing game, his name was on platinum, and supporters believed he was living the dream. His voice appeared on popular tunes, but the money, the rights, and the control were all. Jon B., a budding R&B performer, was performing well in the late 1990s. When Beyoncé was on tour, Destiny's Child served as his opening act. A video interview from that time period reappeared years later, in which John made. He mentioned how he had viewed Beyoncé when she was just 16 or 17 years old, making some embarrassing remarks about her. Even though he was an adult, he acknowledged that it felt terrible. His motions and facial expressions in the video made many people uncomfortable. The reaction quickly began when the clip began to circulate online. His remarks infuriated some, and some even referred to the video as scary. Caused more harm than John could have predicted shortly after rumors started to circulate that Beyoncé's close friend Jay-Z was covertly trying to keep Jon B. out of the music business. According to industry insiders, Jay-Z called people and utilized his ability to prevent John from taking advantage of significant opportunities. One instance occurred in 2002 when John had nearing completion of a project with Pharrell Williams. The project was abruptly. According to the shelved studio engineers, Jay-Z's team got in touch with Pharrell's staff. Only a few days after signing on, John was removed off a major summer tour in 2003. Additionally, he and Usher were scheduled to perform at the 2004 BET Awards, but that slot was abruptly cancelled. According to industry sources, Jay-Z, who had things worsened during a party after the network pulled John and asked that he be cut. Jay-Z celebrated at his 4040 Club in New York towards the end of 2003 to commemorate his. Jon B., who was supposed to be retired, arrived and made an effort to apologize in person, but when he walked, Jay-Z moved away as he approached him and extended his hand, and he told John loudly enough for others to learn that they were unable to discuss that rejection occurred in front of John's own crew and label officials. Following that, artists who had consented to collaborate with him began canceling, and within a few weeks, industry professionals stopped answering his calls. John's songs began to fade off the radio in early 2004. Occurred despite the fact that he was releasing new songs. Data revealed that in just 2 years, his airplay had decreased by more than 75%. A drop like that didn't make sense unless someone or something was at work against him in places like Atlanta, New York, and elsewhere where Jay-Z had business connections. Almost immediately, radio managers stopped playing L.A. John's music on big stations. Blamed listener preferences. Nonetheless, some former workers subsequently acknowledged that were subtly advised to steer away from Jay's music if they were to maintain their good standing with Jay-Z. Jay's 2004 album, Stronger Every Day, had the potential to change everything. Songs and positive reviews. Matthew Knowles, Beyoncé's label owner, ran the label. Father, but everything fell apart as soon as Jay-Z took over as Def Jam president. Magazine stories were removed, and a scheduled 12-city radio tour was cancelled. John was supposed to open for a major TV show, but he never showed up. R&B tour, but that was cancelled as well. John later claimed that the album had very little promotion. Was as though a switch had been flipped, one day, everything went according to plan, and the next day. John's label support was gone, his CD was buried, and someone would answer his calls. Departed Sanctuary Records. He had only committed to one record, which allowed him to move on, but the CD only sold about 200,000 copies despite receiving positive reviews. Significant decline from his platinum hits, such as Bonafide and Cool Relax, at that time Sanctuary. Additionally, Records was experiencing financial difficulties and staff changes. John's. Without anybody to further the idea, he hoped to maintain his career. While still alive, John joined Arsenal Records, a small label, in 2006. Released a Christmas record. 2 years later, he came out with the idea of Helpless Romantic. John was pleased with the album, which was influenced by his recent marriage, although it did not perform well. It only reached number 11 and hardly made the Billboard 200. The single, Oh So Sexy, only lasted 1 week on the R&B chart, and critics were divided. Some claimed he sounded out of ideas, while others admired his lyrics. The creation of music videos severely harmed promotion. In 2009, John attempted to reunite with his former guru, Babyface, with whom he had previously worked. Magic had already signed him, and John's first 2 albums had both sold out platinum, but things didn't work out this time. The music landscape had transformed. The charts were dominated by up-and-coming performers like Chris Brown, Nayo, and Rihanna. John claimed that although the industry had already moved on to his 2012 record, he still wished to learn from those up-and-coming artists. Without assistance from a major label, Comfortable Swag was created and released on. He had complete control over his own label, Vibazil, which he operated with his wife, but additionally indicated that he had little money. A few of the tracks were recorded as early as 2009, and one even surfaced online prior to the album's release. John did the majority of the piece. He wrote, produced, and advertised. Ultimately, it only sold roughly 20,000 copies, although John was nevertheless pleased because he claimed it sold more than his previous. By then, his touring career had also altered, and by the late 1990s, he had a label-backed CD. Performed in modest venues after playing sold-out arenas with several tour vans. Venues for much reduced prices, according to industry sources, and his asking price had decreased to between $25,000 and $40,000 per event. Touring became costly, and John had to handle everything with caution. He acknowledged that his devoted followers kept him going and that their encouragement helped him. The freedom to continue creating music as he sees fit. What transpired with John B. wasn't. Simply put, it was a long, agonizing unraveling that started with a few remarks about Beyoncé when she was a teenager, and her career never really recovered. He discovered the hard way what it means to be on the wrong side of power in the music industry, despite his skill and early success. In 2015, John B.'s life took a significant turn thanks to a business called GSM Entertainment. Brought legal action against him, claiming that he owed them more than $130,000 for studio expenses and tour reservations they claimed to have set up. Chicago, London, and other large towns took him on a performance tour, but John never proceeded with, made no calls or texts, and simply disappeared. The lawsuit said that after signing a management contract, he disregarded his financial obligations and continued to perform at the performances they had scheduled. The judge wasn't sympathetic when John retaliated and said they had mismanaged his career. Persuaded that his countersuit was